So we've already kind of had a conversation about what it means to be a woman without children. But I'm really excited to talk about this subject, chronic illness and the various kinds, because for me, I mean, I don't know a lot about these, so I know if I don't, there will be a lot of people out there who also don't. So I know that you suffer with celiac and lipedema, is it? And there's another...
Adrenal fatigue.
Adrenal fatigue. So can you briefly explain what they are and how they kind of manifest themselves?
Yeah, so I'm not a medical expert, so I can't really explain to you what chronic illness is or why it exists. But my understanding is there's acute illness where you're really sick for a short period of time.
Yeah.
And then there's sort of degenerative type illnesses where you get progressively sicker over a period of time. Whereas chronic illnesses, from my understanding, you are ill always.
Yeah.
So
It's something you
live with.
Yeah.
There will be ups and downs, and you can, I think, probably improve your health with some of these illnesses, but probably you're going to be living with them for the rest of your life. I don't think a lot of the ones, or certainly the ones that I'm living with, majority don't, there's no cure for them. So celiac disease is becoming more known.
Yeah.
And that is where you've got a gluten, well, it's not quite an allergy, but you've got a gluten intolerance. And celiac disease is a autoimmune disease. So if I eat gluten, anything containing any ingredients, including gluten, I get ill. And what my body does is attacks itself. So that's the difference between having an allergy with like peanuts, where your body shuts down, or and more of an intolerance where your body kind of bloats up or you feel uncomfortable. What happens with celiac disease is your body is fighting itself and kind of attacking itself. So it does long-term damage to your intestines and your digestive tract. And that's something...
changes the way you feel as well.
Absolutely changes the way you feel. Yeah. So the symptoms for me, and although everybody's are quite different, the symptoms for me is... we call it being glutened. So depending on how much I've been glutened, I might get excruciating pain, which kind of for me starts in my shoulders, and then it kind of comes forward, and then it's sort of like almost my whole torso, like everything's kind of compressing and getting smaller and smaller. Excruciating pain, but then also complete and utter exhaustion, and I think that's to do with the body's reaction to trying to fight the allergen. Is all the energy is going to try and fight that, and you're just wiped out. Yeah. So if I've had like a mild exposure, I might be absolutely exhausted, and I don't really kind of understand why. And in the lead up to being diagnosed with celiac, we didn't know what the problem was, because I was tired. I couldn't focus on things. I'd have what I called absences, where I'd be talking to you, and then I'd kind of zone off into somewhere, and you'd be going, Karen, and I'd have lost 30 seconds of the conversation. Yeah. I wouldn't have been able to articulate myself. I got my words all completely mixed up. So it had this really overall impact. So there's celiac disease that I'm working with or living with. And then independently to that, is something called lipodema, which is only just starting to surface as something that people know about. Yeah. People have heard of lymphedema, which is where your lymph in your body doesn't circulate, and so it pools, and so you get swelling in your limbs usually. And lipodema is a similar thing, but it's your fat cells. Your fat doesn't kind of process through your body. Yeah. And one of the really ugly but kind of descriptive terms for it is painful fat syndrome. So actually my legs, the slightest touch, and it feels like a huge bruise or like an electric shock almost. So the fat cells are like being stored really close to the surface, and then they're really tender to touch. And the thing with lipodema is apparently the numbers of women that have it are is quite high. I don't know the exact numbers, but it's actually quite high.
Yeah.
But what you would see is you would see somebody that's overweight, and that person, doesn't matter what necessarily so much what I eat or what exercise I do, that sluggish system means that this is the shape that I am. So so you're sort of carrying this extra weight around, and it's only really in the last couple of years that I even knew that it existed. I just thought I was overweight, and that's where I held my weight. So that's kind of a whole different thing.
And I think this is, it's very easy to kind of see what you see on the outside of people, but to then not understand that these things are underlying. And also, I imagine there's probably lots of people who will listen to this conversation who might have certain symptoms of either of these issues and not have it diagnosed and not understand that there is a cause for that, and that actually, if you get the right diagnosis, that there is a way that you can live with it. You just have to understand more about it.
And that's one of the biggest things, actually. And the adrenal fatigue part of it is sort of a knock-on effect from both of those. So my adrenal glands are just exhausted by trying to process the other difficulties that my body's having to deal with. And so I don't have, my energy levels are really impacted because my body isn't naturally creating the adrenaline and cortisol that's kind of balancing out my energy levels. So and the stigma of going and asking for a diagnosis, and really honestly, even for me, I don't want to have a laundry list of things, that just feels quite, I don't know, it's almost like, is it a victimhood to say, I've got this, and this, and you're sort of, there's a sense that maybe you're making excuses for yourself, or so it's quite difficult. There's quite a taboo about giving yourself labels, and what does that mean then? If I'm that, does that mean I have to be a certain way or act a certain way or limit myself to an extent or push myself to an extent? Or I don't know, it's quite loaded to even pursue the diagnoses, and it's something that even now I'm not comfortable always saying those things out loud, because it sounds like you don't want people to feel sorry for you. And then because they're more hidden things, you don't want people to be going, that's just a made up thing. She's just overweight. She just eats too much, or, that's just an excuse because she doesn't want to, do that. Or so it can be quite difficult because you're kind of bringing your baggage and other people's baggage into the fray. When it's something physical, I mean, you can see the shape of my body, but the common perception of that is you're overweight. But some of the other things, celiac disease, is completely hidden. If somebody's got a physical disability or a physical condition that they're living with, people can see it. They still come with expectations around it, but they can see it. But when you're telling them that you're struggling with something or you're living with something and they can't see it, it's very difficult for somebody else to know how to respond to that. We all know, like, if you get a toothache, it's excruciating pain, but nobody can see that you're struggling with that amount of pain. And then you say, I've just got a really bad toothache. Depending what other people's experience is with toothache, they might think, just get on with it. Or, oh my God, that must be so awful, because they know that it can be debilitating. So it's difficult to have those conversations because you don't know what another person's experience is, and you don't want to seek sympathy, and you don't want to, or I don't want to be in the place of victim. I don't want to be in that place of people going, oh, you poor thing, you just want to live your life, and you want to,
So was there a period of time where you were suffering with various symptoms and you didn't know what it was? How did that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the celiac disease, there was 2 years. Well, there was 2 years where I was ill, tired, ill, confused, all of those things, and I didn't know what it was. And
it's quite a long time.
It's quite a long time to not really understand what it was. Trying to figure out, well, am I living with depression? Is that what's going on? Have I got something like ME or, you know, what's the underlying thing going on here?
And of course, in your mind, you usually think
of the worst case scenario. And then it took a long time for the Western Orthodox medicine didn't really want to investigate. My symptoms weren't severe enough to warrant huge investigations, or for them to warrant huge investigations. So I ended up with a holistic doctor, functional medicine doctor, who looked at some of my blood measures and said, oh, hang on a minute, your thyroid levels are out. Well, they're still out. I've got an underactive thyroid. I don't put that in the chronic illnesses bucket, but I suppose it's another factor. And he said, oh, hang on a minute, why are those levels out? Let's do some more exploratory thinking. And that's where he got to the celiac diagnosis. There is a test. He ran the test. It came up as, yes, that's what's going on. Cut out the gluten, was probably 8 months. And suddenly I went from being 40% myself to being 85% myself.
Wow.
From what I ate. I was poisoning myself every single meal. And it was such a simple change. Not saying it's easy to live with, but it's a simple change. And it made all the difference. The lipedema, my body started changing in puberty. And the more I look into it, that lipedema symptoms come on when there are big hormonal changes. I don't really understand the science behind that, but at puberty and apparently in menopause, and lipedema does affect women more than men, and whatever it is in these surges of hormones. So I went from being a very skinny preteen to then putting on weight in my, across puberty and then into my adulthood. And I just thought that's what my body was. What you then find out is that lipedema is hereditary. So of course you look at the women in your family and you think, well, I look like them. So that's just the way we're made. And it is the way we're made, but there's a reason for that. So yes, and then this is where I get conflicted. Does it matter that this has got a name?
It's labelling it and then it becomes something.
Is that a good or a bad thing?
That you live with?
And I still don't know. Does that make it easier for me to know? In some ways it makes it easier for me because I understand that my body is working under limitations because of these conditions that are going on. But on the other hand, it's like, well, everybody's living with the way their body is. And so it's an ongoing conundrum. So I think a lot of times that's the mental thing that you're working through and the emotional side that you're working through. It's not just the physical symptoms of tiredness or aching legs or feeling like really sluggish in your body or being careful about what you eat or finding ways of being still to replenish your energy levels.
It's just what you need.
It's also thinking through the emotions of how does that feel, and it's not fair, and not everybody goes, it kind of brings out those. We talked we talked before about grief and loss, and it's that it's not fair, in denial. I mean, I was definitely in denial about the lipedema, didn't want to go anywhere near a diagnosis, didn't even want to look at the photos, didn't even want to look at, actually, my body is exactly that shape, but didn't want to go there, didn't want another label, thanks very much, I've got enough label. There's a real resistance to kind of having that, the label of a diagnosis, I think.
I think really as well, it's being in tune with your body and whether there's a label or not. I know for me, I've really tried to come to terms with what my body can or cannot tolerate, and whether there's a reason behind what it can or can't tolerate, I don't know. But it's kind of just accepting that and finding ways to live with that and deal with, those things, and accepting that doesn't make you any less of a person to have these things going on at all. It's just, that's what it is.
And I think that's probably the difficult thing, because we spend our lives in an intellectual space thinking that we can control what we do, and we make decisions about where we work and what we study and where we live, and we think we've sort of given ourselves the notion that we're in control of everything in our lives, and we're really not. And then we reel against the fact that we're not. And then we kind of struggle with coming to terms with the fact.
Control.
And I think that's exactly it. And I think that's the journey that certainly I'm on still, is what are my limitations, and finding out what my limitations are, and being gentle on myself that sometimes I need to be slower, and sometimes I need to take time out, and sometimes, you know, I need to look after my physical body before getting the to-do list done of where my brain wants to take me or where my ambition wants to take me. And that's quite interesting. I always say, actually, the universe has had to give me several kicks up the backside to actually learn that lesson of slow down, take time, live in balance.
And I think actually that's important for everybody, regardless of what's going on.
Indeed, but I think the point is, it took the universe had to play me these cards to force me to learn these lessons, to hear the message. And that's really interesting that I've ended up in that place of like, how am I going to learn balance? Because it's not an academic exercise, it's a physical exercise, and so being forced into it has meant I've had to learn it. And I do wonder,
was that something that you needed? It's interesting you say that, because in life I feel you get what you need in whatever scenario, and it might not always look glamorous or be easy. Very rarely it's easy. But actually, maybe that is something that's kind of forced that for you. You know, it's quite a nice way to look at it, because it kind of validates that it's okay, because that, you know, you can see the positive in that, and you can use it in a positive way, and not kind of, as you say, hold on to it. And you know,
I think you have to find the positive in it, and not saying that that's easy every day, and there are different things that make that difficult, but that's the goal. That's the place of acceptance, of feeling comfortable that this is just the way it is. This is what I need to do to be able to support that. These are the expectations I need to let go of. This is the way my life is, and once I accept that that's what it is, finding a way of living well within the restrictions that are being placed around me, but actually coming out to a point where even if I didn't have the restrictions, that would probably be the healthy way to live your life anyway, in balance, and taking moments to pause and recuperate and look after yourself, like you say, is where all of us should be. It's just I needed a kick up the behind to kind of get there, I think. So, you know, we'll see where I get to.
And do you still find it challenging in social situations sometimes? Because I know there's not enough understanding about celiac. Lipodima, definitely not. I know I didn't know what it was until I had this conversation with you. How does that kind of feel in situations?
I mean, the celiac disease thing is just hilarious when people say, well, can't you just have a little bit? And you just think, no, I can't have a little bit.
I'd love to have a little bit.
I'd love to have a little bit. But that doesn't upset me in quite the same way. And I think it's because the lipedema is a very, very physical thing. And of course it plays into our issues around body image and kind of how we look to the world. And so that's the one of the three that's the most struggle. And I have turned down opportunities to go places or to do things because I think I haven't got anything to wear. I can't find anything to wear that I'm going to feel comfortable in to go to that black tie event, red carpet opening, because I don't want to, you know, it's that kind of stuff. That it's being okay, or being okay to be challenged by those things and to just be who I am and that be all right.
And I guess stepping out when you are feeling insecure about it and being comfortable with that insecurity, that's something you deal with every day.
Something that you deal with every day, but I think that the key thing is to not let it define you and to not to protect yourself, and so to be gentle with yourself. And if it is going to be too difficult to go, then think about whether you do want to put yourself in that situation. But being really careful that you're not isolating yourself, because it could be easy. It could be easy to isolate yourself and just withdraw. And then how's that going to be? Because then you're not getting any social interaction, and you're not going to... then that's a negative spiral that would be such a difficult place to be in. But when you are feeling brave, go and do the brave things. But when you are feeling more vulnerable, acknowledging that and finding a way of getting support for that. So it's an ongoing balance, really, about taking part in life and enjoying life, but also being gentle with yourself to say, do you know what, today it's okay if I don't do that, but not feeling like not feeling like the conditions or the situation or your health is controlling you. I think that's kind of the place where I'm at now, but some days maybe that balance kind of throws itself out, and I think those are the days where you really need to make sure that you find other people that are in the same situation, or just people that understand, people you can say, I'm just feeling a bit rubbish today, and not judge yourself, and be around people that aren't going to judge you either, that are going to supportively say, well, that's okay, let's find another way around this. But of course that can be difficult, but I guess it's all about, balance is the theme of it, of trying to find the right balance to kind of be able to steadily get through life, rather than letting these illnesses or these conditions that I will have always take over and become the defining force, but actually seeing what I can do to meet them, to respond to them, and making adjustments to make myself healthier and feel more confident without even that taking over my life. So I think the message really for me is finding the right balance in managing your day-to-day, going about your everyday life.
Which is actually a brilliant kind of metaphor and message for people in general. It's understanding what's going on within you in whichever form it manifests itself, and dealing with that in a very loving, understanding way, and not giving it too much of your energy that it kind of takes over life, as you say. Just learning to accept it, and
learning to in my work, I've kind of come up with it. I'm a milestone mentor, I call myself, but I come up with this process that's all about honouring, accepting, releasing and trusting in the transitions that we go through in life. And although a chronic illness isn't so much a milestone, there was a threshold. At one point I didn't have that condition to deal with, and now I do. That it's like really acknowledging that and honouring the fact that that is my situation. It's finding some acceptance in it. It's releasing, letting go of it's not fair and it's not the way it should be, and I didn't want it to be like this. And then just trusting that whatever it is that you're going through, you can, with the right support, get to the other side and feel kind of confident to carry on with your life. So
and do everything that you would like to do, even if slightly differently sometimes, or slightly more carefully, which you're a great example of.
Thank you.